So my father actually was diagnosed by a surgeon that he saw, and actually there were several visits to different doctors as time went on. So what happened was, when he had this visit with the surgeon, I wasn't able to go with him, but my husband went with him. And it was shared with my father that he had Merkel cell carcinoma, that it had spread. It was not curable. Mind you, he did have to have surgery. When my husband shared this information with me right after his visit, I just felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. The hard part for us was that with my father, he'd had, I'm going to say, a day or so to kind of process the fact that he'd been given this diagnosis, and by the time I got to him and spoke to him, he was really quite, I'm going to say, it's like he had accepted the diagnosis. He was told he had anywhere between 1.5 to 5 years to live. He was told that whatever he wanted to do now, while he was physically well enough, that he should do it, because as time passed, he maybe wouldn't be well enough to do whatever he wanted. And I do remember when I spoke to him and asked him about, what the doctor said, and he said, well, I have 5 years to live. So again, it seemed like he'd come to terms with it, and he was going to make the most of it. And again, from my brother's perspectives, as well as mine, it was hard to kind of accept that, and not knowing a definite time frame, that knowing that every day was really special, every holiday was really special. After I'd spoken to my father, I was fortunate enough to actually receive a phone call from the surgeon at home on a holiday Monday. And he shared what his conversation was with my father, and tried to relay his concerns as a surgeon, because my father was very adamant about not treating this at all. So he had convinced my father that he should have surgery. But I thought it was really thoughtful of the surgeon to actually call me at home directly to have the conversation with me, which was really helpful. Palliative care was introduced about 3 months before my dad died. And it really was at the instigation of myself. And because I do work in healthcare, I was able to connect with some people just to really understand what the process was and ensure that Dad had what he needed. No one ever made the suggestion of palliative care services. I remember seeing the medical oncologist with him, and I did try to go to every appointment with him. And what they did was they said, well, we'll book you in 2 months and see how you feel about chemotherapy. But my dad was very vocal and said he was not going to try chemotherapy. He knew that chemotherapy, even though they offered it, they had said it would not cure the cancer that he had. And so he remembered what my mother went through, so he was not going to do that. But anyway, regardless, we were given an appointment for 2 months later. And when it got closer to that appointment, my father said, well, why would I go back to the cancer center? Because I'm not going to take chemotherapy, and I know that this is going to kill me, and I'll die from this, so I'm not going to go there. And I remember thinking, well, excuse me. I remember thinking that we can't just leave him and not go to the cancer center or have some help. So I reached out to some colleagues at work to find out how do we get palliative care services implemented at home. I also remember thinking, or being disappointed, that no one had the conversation with him. That no one said, we can make it easier for you at home. You can have a visit by a palliative care doctor, there can be nurses. We can make sure that when you're not able to ambulate or get around at home, we can provide meals. No one ever had that conversation with him. And I was frustrated that no one really would admit that he was going to die. So, like I said, I was the one that initiated palliative care services through CCAC. It was challenging in that, again, I couldn't always be there for every visit that my father had. I did try to be there when the physician was there. They were able to implement services, actually I'm going to say fairly quickly, but at the time he really wasn't in need of, I'm going to say, extensive services. It truly was just the physician that came in every couple of weeks, and then a nurse as well. But as we went along, that's where we ran into some challenges. And I think if the services had been provided even sooner, then people could have gotten to know him a little better and understand how much independence he really had and what he required. I think when they first came in, they thought he was doing really well, but he declined so quickly that it was hard to get things implemented at the very end. I think to start with, to understand what the assessments are. You know, how do they measure or gauge where that patient is at? How do I, as a family member who know them truly the best, helping me understand that? And then as they go along, what are those assessments and how do they measure that he is declining? Understanding what the services are, because we really didn't know what the services were at the time. And then also, how do we access those services? And I do believe that we did, how do I word this? We knew we could get, for example, PSW services, but by the time they implemented that, it was, for us, it was too short of, like it was too long of a time period, and such a short period for him where truly we needed help right away. So knowing what the services were, and I'm going to say the time frame as to when those could be implemented, because that was very difficult for us. I think the other piece is like I mentioned about the pain control, just understanding what that does to people, because it would have helped us as family members as well. Just having caregivers feel comfortable having those conversations, because no one ever did. And it was only the surgeon at the very beginning that was very frank and open about, you know, this will take your life, and it's not, you know, you've got maybe this amount of time, and so let's make the best of it. But nobody ever talked about what are they going to do to help him get to the end. The only person that did have the conversation about his wishes was actually the palliative care doctor that came to see him at home. Mm-hmm. And, you know, she acknowledged that he did want to die at home. She was upfront in saying that, you know, that may not be possible. We'll see when the time comes. But that was truly the only person. Even the CCA coordinator did not. But I will tell you, that surgeon, and my husband relayed what was said at the visit because he was there at the first visit, but that conversation was, this is the type of cancer it is. This is generally what we see in people. This has spread. This is not curable. Which was, I mean, it was, I'm going to say, as family, nobody wants to hear that, but at least you're appreciative and you know where you stand. But the piece that seemed to be missing was, and these are the next steps. This is what we'll be doing, right? And, you know, when we saw the medical oncologist several times, there was never, and never once was it mentioned, this will take your life, this will take your life. Mm. And this is what we'll do to help. All they seemed focused on was the treatment. And my father was not going there. And you know, he was interesting. My father was very, even though English was not his first language, you know, very astute and able to pick up kind of the vibes on what was going on around him. And you know, I remember him once saying to me, you know, Mila, he says, these people don't care about me. And I thought, oh, that's so sad, because we all, we all care, because I'm part of the healthcare system too, right? But it was like they had one agenda, and it was like, this man is going to die. Can you not help him out in providing what he needs to help him get there? And it took a lot of pushing to get that. It has to be difficult. Like, I mean, obviously the patients are devastated, and as family members you are as well. But in all fairness, to help patients make the choices about their care, they have to have those conversations. I think it's really important if family members can be there for that conversation as well. I'm not sure. Is it difficult for providers to, I'm going to say, not that they're giving up on a patient, but to recognize that the prognosis is not good. And so what can we do? You're still providing care when you implement palliative care services. And so recognizing that is a part of their care as well, and it doesn't have to be an active cancer treatment for patients. Like I said, I think family is so important. I know not everybody has family, but for us to be there with our loved ones is really important, so that we can reinforce and kind of have continue the conversations at home. And it makes me, when I've thought about what could we do to make it better for patients and family members and providers. In the chart, is that the first piece in the cancer record that pops up to say, this was a conversation that was had. This gentleman was told by the surgeon that this is, what the cancer is, what the prognosis is, and what the conversation was that they had with him. So that every provider going forward saw that was discussed, and maybe that was it. Maybe they truthfully weren't aware that the surgeon had that conversation, and they themselves were uncomfortable having that conversation. I don't know. But I do think it is sad that we're not able to talk about it. It's not easy, but we owe that to patients, because it's not patient, focused when we won't come to terms with the fact that this is end-of-life care, and part of that care involves putting all the right services in place.